Indie games featuring pixel art are not exactly few and far between. Whether to keep a development team small and a budget low, or as a stylistic choice meant to evoke nostalgic feelings from the player, many indie developers choose a 2D pixel art aesthetic. It's not often, though, that the quality of pixel art goes far beyond the fidelity of the 16-bit era, or most often the 8-bit era, as it's often been thought that using 3D techniques becomes easier or more cost-effective at a certain point, even for games played on a 2D plane. It's why, even though we've had masterpiece tier 2D action exploration platformers released in the last few years, like Ori and the Blind Forest, Dead Cells, and Hollow Knight, most of them are made with 3D model trickery. This has been cited as the reason that even Koji Igarashi, the master craftsman of 2D Castlevania games, opted to use this so-called 2.5D technique for the fantastic Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which came out at the beginning of the summer. At the tail end of the summer, Spanish developer The Game Kitchen cooked up their own 2D action exploration platformer, which, much like Bloodstained, takes a lot of cues from Igarashi's Castlevania games, but unlike Bloodstained, keeps it 100% old school, with what might just be the most stunning hand-drawn pixel art I've ever seen. The dark, violent, and extremely penitent Blasphemous. Blasphemous takes place in a world heavily inspired by Judeo-Christian religions, and while the religion that is practiced in the land of Orthodoxia, that's not one of my super clever jokes, it's actually the name of the country in Blasphemous, is fictional, the imagery and lore are not hard to see as perversions of medieval Orthodox Christianity. You play as the Penitent One, a man on a quest of epic self-flagellation in order to atone for a sin which we are never made aware of as players, but I'd say it's safe to guess that blasphemy had something to do with it? The Penitent One isn't the only one who has sins to atone for either, as every enemy character in the game is a monster who has been rendered in their current state as penance for their sins. Even the friendly NPCs you interact with range from plague-stricken villagers, worshippers wearing similar dunce caps to your own, or grotesque monsters who happen to have enough of their faculties remaining to talk to you instead of attacking you on sight. This world is conveyed to you in-game through a generous amount of voice-acted sequences, as well as in stunningly drawn cinematics, which are few in number and quite short, but jaw-droppingly beautiful. The story and the game are not overly long, with my rather thorough playthrough taking about 20 hours, but there are pages upon pages of lore attached to the item descriptions which you can read in the inventory menus. If any of this sounds familiar, it's because in addition to being heavily inspired by the Igarashi era of Castlevania, there is a large serving of Dark Souls on the side. To save, heal, and refill your healing items, you rest at prayer altars, just like the bonfires of Dark Souls, lanterns of Bloodborne, or Buddha statues of Sekiro. And like those games, this also respawns every enemy in the game, aside from bosses and select path-blocking enemies. Killing these path-blocking enemies, kicking down ladders, activating elevators, chopping down trees, or opening doors with switches allow you to open shortcuts back to other areas, which is also a key element of the Dark Souls games. Finding a shortcut is the new finding a save point. Yeah, but there are also save points. You can return to your slain body after you die, which replenishes a resource, but unlike Dark Souls, your experience or currency are not on the line. Instead, death takes a small toll on your mana pool, and recovering your body replenishes it back to maximum. This mana capping status is called guilt, and in addition to returning to your slain body to rid yourself of guilt, you can also visit confessional statues and pay an indulgence to remove the status. I don't want to veer too far into spoiler territory, but destroying these statues and overcoming the challenges that wait beyond them will have an effect on the story, so hint hint. You don't have access to very many spells in the first half of the game, so building up a lot of guilt is a minor annoyance more than a stress-inducing punishment. However, that doesn't mean the game itself is a breeze. The combat is intense and challenging, but it's also really awesome. There is only one weapon in the game, the Mea Culpa, a barbed sword which feels weighty, has satisfying sound effects, and can be used to attack, block, and if you can master the timing, you can do a parry riposte with it as well. A late game boss essentially requires the use of this move, so it's smart to do at least a bit of practice during the game, but the timing of this technique is extremely tight and changes from enemy to enemy. There will be no Sekiro-like flutter tapping here, you need to commit to a specific counter window, but when you nail one, it feels great. Another mechanic which feels like it was pulled right out of Sekiro are the execution moves, which become available when an enemy is brought down to a low enough health level but not killed. Sadly, the window for this is also very tight, as the animations are stunning and different for every enemy, but it's so easy to overdamage an enemy and end up killing them rather than ready them for an execution, that I'm certain I didn't even see half of the possible executions in the game. As you upgrade the Mea Culpa, you will not only increase its damage, but unlock and improve skills such as a projectile made out of your own blood, a plunging attack, a charge strike, and my favorite attack in the game, a dashing thrust, which can not only close gaps fast, but also does heavy damage. There are also vendors scattered around the map, each of whom sell 3 items of varying usefulness. Once you bought all these items and unlocked all the Mea Culpa upgrades, there's nothing else to spend money on other than the plenary indulgences. There are no stats to invest in, character classes to build, or consumable items to replenish, so at a certain point, the experience and money in the game become useless. Luckily, this only happens very late in the game, so the sense of progression will remain for most of the experience. Also, quick tip for getting that last Mea Culpa upgrade, you can't die or use fast travel while you're hunting down the 3 targets, but you can pray at altars. Thank you to all who stuck with my stream while I was ripping my hair out over that side quest. The side quests themselves could also stand to be a bit more clear. Similar to the From Software games, there is no system of tracking side quests, indication of what the goals of the quests are, or any kind of map marker telling you where to go to complete them. It's here that I come up against the core design concept, which is difficult for me to call good or bad definitively. On one hand, the ambiguous nature of the side quests encourages players to think, explore, go online and engage in forums, share discoveries with one another, and cultivate a community. But on the other, it made it difficult for me to fully explore the game without seeking external sources. I try to never consult a guide or forum while I'm playing games that I'm covering, as I want to have a good idea of how well the game itself presents its goals, mechanics, and concepts, but I'm starting to find that is causing me to miss aspects of these games which should not be absent from my videos. Blasphemous is certainly an example of a game which has a lot of mysterious depth, which is there for players who want to spend hours exploring and experimenting, but many players will just find themselves either missing huge chunks of the game, or consulting online forums to point them in the right direction. Again, this is not inherently a good thing or a bad thing, it's really down to taste, and personally I'd like a few more indications of side quest progress and goals in-game than what Blasphemous offers. That being said, I was able to complete a few of the major side quests with minimal consultation from other players, so you don't exactly need to have a walkthrough open leading you step by step through the game. In fact, I'd encourage you to not even peek at a single secondary source until you defeated the first 4 bosses. After you beat the intro boss, the game is evenly divided into defeating 3 main bosses to open up 1 door, then another 3 main bosses to activate an elevator, with a couple smaller fights in between and final fights to cap off each segment of the game. Spoilers, there is a final boss fight. As far as I can tell, very few, if any, of the side quests are locked off by progressing too far, but many of them require access to areas and abilities which are simply not possible to get in the first half of the game. So all you'll be doing by consulting the internet before the midpoint in the game would be spoiling your own sense of mystery and exploration. A lot of the exploration is gated by certain abilities, which are earned in the form of relics. 3 relics can be equipped at any given time, and there are more than 3 relics. I did not like this system. It made for several moments where I thought I had a certain relic active, only to realize I didn't, by dying. One of my major complaints in the early game was that the presence of bottomless pits that kill you instantly made it scary to attempt to explore downward, as you could be discovering a secret area, or you could just die. My concerns were alleviated when I acquired a relic that lets you survive these falls and access new areas, but there are times when you will not have this active, think you do, and...
I'm gonna make it! I'm gonna make it! This is the greatest thrill of my life! I'm king of the world! Woohoo! Woohoo!
I personally never saw it as a challenging or strategic feature, it just made for some "ah crap, I thought I still had that equipped" moments, not exactly the sophisticated Dark Souls-like challenge the rest of the game strives for, but not game-breaking either. I just failed to see why the ability to equip all relics at once would be anything but a benefit to the experience. In addition to relics, you can also equip rosary beads, which act as passive buffs. These can be things like giving you elemental resistances or a shorter charge time on the power strike, and one even gave me a UI enhancement showing me the enemy health bars. I found this one extremely handy as I was able to plan my defensive strategies much better, knowing when I would be dealing a death blow. I played the hell out of the PC version through GOG, and I also dabbled in the Switch version a little bit. The Switch version runs quite well in handheld mode, but the standard Joy-Con button format D-pad isn't ideal for a game this demanding, so I'd recommend playing on PC, PS4, Xbox One, or if you must play on a Switch, it would be a good idea to have a controller with a better D-pad at the ready, be it a Pro controller or a third-party Joy-Con with a D-pad which isn't terrible. The Game Kitchen made a bloody incredible game here, and if you're up for a challenge and seeing some of the most beautiful sights to come out of Spain since Penelope CRUZ, don your dunce helm, grab your mea culpa, and repent your blasphemy, you dirty, sexy sinner. You thought I wasn't gonna get the beautiful woman gag in there this time, didn't you?